Well, hey, DCL podcast fans, it's Steve. As you'll be able to tell, we recorded this show late last summer, and it's a little delayed getting out. And you will see that at the very end, we do some speculation on the treasure. Of course, a lot of the information that we speculate about on the treasure has already been out, such as the Coco restaurant and the Moana show. But I thought it was kind of fun to leave it in there just to see what we got right and what we got wrong. So, as always, we really appreciate Frank coming back and sharing his experiences as he and his beautiful wife Karen sail on Disney Cruise Line. So, as they say, on with the show. Enjoy, everybody. Well, hello, and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you cruise a little smarter. And it's just me today. Everybody else is busy. Nova's in Europe. Christy's doing busy Christy lawyer stuff, and Lake is working. So I'd like to welcome back to the show. He's been on so many times, and I always enjoy our chats. Welcome back to the show, Frank, down in Florida. How you doing?
Doing real good. Thanks, Steve.
Good to see you too. Sorry you're stuck with me once again. It's just been busy. That's why Lake's joining us too. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what it is about. I felt like you go through the pandemic and there was like not much going on and there was like plenty of time to do stuff. And then things kind of picked up, and I don't know where things have gone up lately, but it's like even gone to 11, as they say, I guess, in my life. How about you?
Summer's been not quite as busy as usual, but it's like some of our local schools actually went back today. So it's ridiculous. We're back in the swing of it.
Definitely. So I was just in Maui yesterday, and I was like, me and the guy I was flying with went for a bike ride, and we went by this elementary school, and I was like, yep, school starts tomorrow in Maui too. So I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're already there.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So our kids actually get another month before they go back. So is it a month? 3 weeks at least before they go back. So got a little bit more summer left up here in the Northwest. Well, we are going to turn to your guys' latest trip, which is a bucket list trip for Anawake and I. And I'll let you kind of set up where you guys went this time, Frank.
So we did the 10-night Southern Caribbean on the Fantasy just in July, not too long ago, which went to a few ports that Disney rarely, if ever, goes to, Aruba and Bonaire particularly, and then also went to Antigua and St. Thomas and Castaway as well, which obviously are great places to go to.
So you and Karen traveled on this one, right? And you went with friends this time.
We did, and we went with another couple friends of ours. Interestingly, they are friends that we actually met years ago on a Disney cruise. It's kind of a funny story because we were on the Magic and we went to dinner the first night, and there was no one else there. So we thought we were going to have a table to ourselves. And then the next night, this other couple appears, and it turned out they'd gone to Palo on the first night, and that's why they weren't at dinner on the first night. And, we just almost immediately became friends. We had a lot of stuff in common, and we've visited them. They visited us. We've cruised together a bunch of times. So it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome when you can, make connections like that. And it's always fun to, especially, sail with friends, whether you do everything, together with them or not, or just having those dinners together in the evenings is awesome, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And we had guaranteed cabins for this cruise, and we ended up getting connecting cabins, which was nice because we had those cabins where you can open up the space between the verandas. And so, didn't really matter that the rooms were connecting, but it was nice to sort of almost have a larger veranda shared, which was a good place to sort of go hang out and watch the ocean go by, that sort of thing.
We had that in the Med this last time, and it was like our own version of concierge, I guess. That's as close as we're going to get to concierge these days. Was having those adjoining cabins. So good on you guys. How did the rooms turn out? Did you guys get rooms you enjoyed?
Yeah, we actually got the family rooms with the big round shower and the verandas that we connected. I think they were probably less desirable rooms because they were on, deck 6, and we were right on top of the lifeboats.
Oh, yeah, so we had that too.
I don't know. I didn't think it was that big a deal. I mean, you couldn't look out and look down and see straight down like onto the pier or anything like that. But, you can see the ocean and all that stuff going by. So I thought it was great.
So we're just going to totally go sideways. I like this. So ours, I looked at it and we were kind of above the lobby before you got to the movie theater. So like, depending upon where you are in deck 6, sometimes, either have the movie theater below you or parts of the kids clubs and stuff like that. Did you look to see what was below you guys?
Yeah, it was actually a kids club hallway.
Okay.
And it was fine. We really never noticed much noise or anything like that.
Yeah, we've always been lucky. I've never really noticed too much noise or anything like that as far as our cabins go.
Yeah, I mean, the only time I've had issue with that is on deck 10 when you're under the pool deck, because at a certain point they start moving the pool chairs around and that can get a little annoying, but otherwise really never had any issues.
Yeah, I guess that's true. We had deck 8 once on the Magic and you could hear the pool, but yeah, we sleep through most of that luckily. And there's always that tip of bringing white noise with your phone these days or whatever, however you want to do it. Well, awesome. So you guys, this one leaves out of Port Canaveral, like you said, 10 days down to just some amazing different islands. We'll mostly touch on what you guys did in the ports, because I think that's what's most interesting about the Southern Caribbean. But you guys are on the Fantasy again. Did you guys do anything ahead of time when you went down before the sailing?
No, we're about 2 hours from the port, so we just drove down morning of, and it was an interesting situation. I think there's been some news out there about this, but this was our first cruise as Pearl. And when we had initially done our check-in, we had like boarding group 6 or 7 or something like that. And then a couple of weeks before the cruise, I went to just take a look at it, and suddenly we've been given arrive whenever you want in your boarding group 2, which apparently seems like what they're doing right now for Pearl. I don't know. It used to be a platinum benefit. I'm not sure if they're doing it for platinum people or not. But so, we just jumped in the car, went down, and off we went.
I haven't seen it for platinum. We checked in for our cruise next month and we picked a boarding time out of San Diego. So I haven't seen any changes like that. I would assume that it's mostly for Pearl, I would guess. Well, besides being able to arrive whenever you want, as far as Pearl goes, did you guys were you able to use like that concierge type space where you can hang out ahead of time? Or is that still just concierge only?
No, that's still just concierge. We were just out in the main lobby with everyone, which was fine.
The rest of the riffraff?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah. I'm just kidding about the riffraffs. Those are my words, not yours.
I mean, it's better to be going on the cruise than not. I don't really care where you put me, to be honest with you.
Exactly. As long as you get on the ship. Fantasy. I know you guys have been on the Fantasy a lot. What was your thoughts getting back on her? What are some of the things that you enjoy about the Fantasy, Frank, you and Karen?
Yeah, we hadn't been on the Fantasy in a while, so it was nice to get back on her. We like a number of things. We're fans of Remy, so it's nice to be on the ship that has Remy. We like the adult area on the Fantasy with the tube and Skyline and the other places back there. The other thing that we really like is having a real deck 4 that goes all the way around the ship, which unfortunately they didn't manage to do on the Wish, and I assume probably won't happen on the Treasure either. And that's actually a nice place just to, go for a walk around the ship. But also we like sitting out there on those big blue chairs and just kind of hanging out and watching the ocean go by.
I agree with you on that. I guess I could kind of see the Wish if it's just doing 3 and 4 night sailings. But man, if you're on like a 7-night sailing or more, if the Treasure ends up doing those longer ones, it's nice to have that space to get out and kind of stretch your legs a little bit, especially on those longer cruises on a sea day or so.
Right. I mean, sometimes we'll go like because we usually have second dining, we'll go between the show and dinner and we'll go for a little walk and watch the sunset if it's that time of year, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we always like going right after dinner, after filling yourself up, going for like a little bit of a walk around a couple of times before we go do something in the evening, because we do that late night dinner as well. What were some of the things that you guys did this time? You were traveling with friends. What were some of the things that you did on the ship? I do believe I saw some medals that possibly were won this time.
Yes, they were. So my sweet spot for trivia is 70s music, and actually ended up in a tie and had to do a tiebreaker question, but managed to get that one. And so we got the, which one was it? Oh, it's a Pluto winner's medal. And then we also tied for the win in 80s music trivia. There were about 6 of us, but didn't get that tiebreaker. So that one was a medal I hadn't seen before. It was a Chip and Dale winner menu.
Oh, I haven't seen that one either.
Thought that would have been pretty cool. But yeah, so we did that. What I will tell you, and I don't know if this is an issue anymore, but the absolute first thing we did when we got on the ship was we went to guest services, because we had heard that that's what you needed to do to get one of those 50th anniversary floating ship speakers. And so both the friend I was traveling with and I, we were both able to get one. The cast member told us we got the last 2, because apparently up to that point, they were getting about 10 of them for each sailing. But now what I've seen is that you can actually order those through the app, like when you order stuff before you go on the ship, like if you're ordering flowers or drink packages or any of that kind of stuff, you can also order the floaty ship speaker. So we were able to do that, which was pretty cool. Otherwise, we went to several movies. We did some other trivias. There's a sort of a lot of stuff going on around the ship. They did some cooking demonstrations, those kinds of things, and those are always fun.
So beyond the regular shows on the Fantasy, what extra shows did they have on board this time? Did they have a juggler, comedian, that type of stuff?
So they had a juggler. They had a magician who I had never seen before. I'm trying to remember his name. I think it's John Armstrong. And his ship is the Tiny Plunger. I don't know if people have ever seen the Tiny Plunger, but it's like a little toilet plunger, but it's about the size of a ballpoint pen. And he uses it to like pick up cards. And sometimes when he hits the cards, it picks up the top ones. Sometimes it picks up 4 or 5 cards. And he uses that thing to find your card. And apparently he's been on Penn and Teller, Fool Us, and all that kind of stuff. So he was a lot of fun. The other thing they did is they did some panels that they don't usually do on the shorter cruises. So one afternoon, they did a panel where they had 3 of the performers from the main theater shows, basically just answering questions about their careers and their lives and those kinds of things. And then another day, they had one of the bridge officers and one of the engineering officers, and they showed some pictures of various controls and that sort of stuff, talked about how they work the ship, talked about how the bridge and engineering are always fighting with each other because the bridge wants to go faster, but engineering wants to be more efficient. So yeah, those were kind of fun too.
That's pretty. I wish they had that on more of this, but I'm glad that they do have them on these specialty cruises, because I would be fascinated to listen to them talk about the bridge and the engineering section.
Yeah, they showed like the console where they can play all the horns and all that sort of stuff and those kinds of things. It was pretty neat.
So it's more than one button for the horn. I guess I thought it'd be like some computerized.
Yeah, no, it's like a console, and it sort of looks like, depending on which one you push, it plays that particular horn.
Wow, that's kind of cool. One of these days. So we had Doug was on, and he was talking about it was kind of a miss for them over on the Dream as far as like the gold and platinum and above member celebration that they do on the longer cruises. Did you guys go to that by any chance?
Yeah, they did that. And it was in the theater, in the main theater, and it was basically a behind the scenes about Aladdin, which we've actually seen before because the last cruise that we went on that was that long, they did the same thing. We ended up not going because we didn't get the announcement about it until the night before, and we already had other plans that day. So we missed out on, I guess, free Rice Krispie treats, but that's okay.
And maybe, I don't know if they would have had a character that are not there because you were already, kind of seeing the back scenes. What's your thought of the app, Frank, these days, as far as being able to, since you missed that, was that on the app, do you think, or was that kind of a late thing? What's your thought about the app as far as keeping up with what's going on?
Never in the app. And I got paper navigators. They're back. Got one for every day. Wasn't in there.
Okay.
They basically delivered a card to our stateroom the night before and said, this is when it is. This is where it's going to be. And that was the only information that we got about that. Generally, I'm fine with the app. The app is okay. You can look at stuff and find things. And for the most part, the problem is you have to remember to refresh it every day because stuff changes. And so you don't want to miss out on something. But we got to see most of the stuff that we wanted to see during the cruise. So it worked out all right.
That's a good point there about refreshing. And they've actually pushed a lot of messages on the app when we were in Europe, talking about time changes and a couple other different things like that. But it seemed like, I wish there was like, I don't know how they would do it. I wish there was like one kind of message area where you could go back and kind of scroll through just to see like, whatever you missed, because I did notice that it seemed like they were putting a lot of stuff on there, but if you weren't like not that you have to constantly look at it, but if you weren't paying attention, you'd probably miss it pretty easily.
Right. I don't know. Were they doing the morning show on the Europe cruise?
They were, and you know what? I've never watched that.
Like we watch that every day. They talk about that stuff.
So maybe I need to add that to my repertoire.
This one was just by the mid to end point of the cruise, it was kind of getting out of control between Ashley, who was the cruise director, and Anne, who was the assistant cruise director, and just sort of the back and forth that they were having. So it was actually kind of fun to watch.
Okay,
and
so
sort of highlight the kind of the big things that are going on during the day.
So for the newbie cruisers or myself who has never really paid attention to that, when do they show that? And is it kind of, is it on a cycle? So if you missed the live,
so it basically runs for like 3 or 4 hours every morning. So it's just, it's on Channel 1 and they film it in various locations around the ship. And Although this time, I got to say, it did not look like they were filming it in various locations. It looked like they were using digital backgrounds to make it seem like they were in various places. I don't know that for sure, but that's what it looked like to me. But anyway, they talk about the things that are going on that day. Don't miss this, that, or the other thing, this show. And sometimes they talked about like added performances. So like on the day that Frozen was playing in the main theater, it was a C day. So they added a performance like at 12:30 or 1:00 in addition to the 2 evening performances. So again, if you're not refreshing the app or thinking about it, you might miss that. So it's useful for those kinds of things.
So a good tip there. Next time when we sail, especially on those longer cruises, we need to turn that on in the morning to pay attention to what's going on, I guess. Might be a better way. Two other questions. So how is Remy, and what do you enjoy when you go to Remy? Do you do the French side or the American side? What do you guys do?
So the friends that we are traveling with are not Remy people.
Okay.
They have been to Remy dinner all of once. That was with us. And that was when their marriage proposal happened. So very special occasion. So we didn't do Remy dinner because we wanted to have our dinners with them, but we did Remy brunch on this trip.
Okay.
And we actually like the brunch a lot. The brunch is really relaxed. They will do substitutions if there's things on the menu that you don't like. So we were able to take advantage of that. And they do a champagne pairing that's really nice. So at the beginning of the brunch, everybody gets a glass of champagne, but then you can also order an additional sort of 3 glasses of champagne to go along with the food on the menu. And that's really nice as well. So it's just sort of a relaxing, and it's a little less time. Remy dinner can take 3+ hours. The brunch is about an hour and a half or so. So it doesn't eat up so much time either.
How would you compare it to Palo brunch as far as between Remy and Palo?
It's just really different. I mean, we did both Palo brunch and dinner on this cruise as well. Palo brunch to me is more of a, how much food can you possibly eat? Because they're just going to keep bringing it, even if you don't order it. Versus Remy, which is sort of very refined. These are the courses. We bring them out one by one. Everybody sort of has the same thing. I like them both very much. We've sort of figured out now how to kind of make Palo brunch work, even though they don't have the buffet anymore. You just have to sort of be judicious in what you order and know that they have some things that you can get that aren't necessarily on the menu. So you need to make sure you ask for them. Like Karen's, one of her favorite things at Palo brunch is the almond croissants. And usually they won't bring those unless you ask for them. And the other thing is they have these amazing Nutella muffin things that one of the folks we were cruising with thought was like the best thing she'd ever had. But I think it's just a matter of kind of working through it. And I think they're both worth doing if you like having sort of a more upscale meal. I know you'll never go to Palo brunch. We've sort of established that. And I think it's a badge of honor for you now. So I understand that.
It is my shtick, but you actually intrigued me with Remy. I think we're going to have to do Remy next time we're on the Dream or the Fantasy, and whether it's dinner or brunch, I'd like to go there. Going to Palo, did they invite you back into the kitchen? I know you're kind of one of the celebrity chefs that had been back there before. So for your dinner, did they bring you back there at all to kind of give them some tips?
They did not. I'm actually not sure they're doing that anymore, but I still have my Palo chef outfit that I could pull out if I need to.
That's for our longtime listeners that know that Frank actually did what was it called? I can't remember. No, Cook Like a Chef. BR Chef, that's right. They used to do that. We'll look for it if they possibly do it in the future on the Fantasy and the Dream. But a great experience there, wasn't it?
It was fantastic.
All right, let's turn to the cruise itself. While we're talking about the cruise, I guess. But I got one other question. Have you ever done Palo the first night? Because that's like, so they limit you to 1 seating at Palo. Unless you go the first night, then you can get 2. Have you done that before? Because we're thinking about doing it on this next trip.
And they do the same thing at Remy. We've done that once. I think that, it's hard to tell because when we were in Palo, both for brunch and for dinner, it didn't look full either time. But I'm also not sure that wasn't on purpose, because I think the number of servers they had pretty much could just about handle who was there. And I'm not sure they could have handled any more tables.
Okay.
There's been a lot of turnover. I mean, we used to know a bunch of the servers in Palo. There was only one that I recognized on this cruise. The rest of them all seemed to be new people. And I think they're just working really hard to try to kind of hire people back after the pandemic, because a lot of people left and went off and did other things and just decided not to come back.
I think we're kind of hearing that same thing. Our server last time he was leaving, he was amazing, but he and his girlfriend, soon to be fiance, were moving on to bigger and better things for them, which was kind of cool, but kind of sad to see.
It was interesting. The hostess at Remy, I was looking at her. It's like, I know you. Why do I know you? She was our assistant server 4 or 5 years ago, and she's kind of worked herself up to now. Now she's up at Remy, and so that was nice to see.
Yeah, it's cool to see him advance like that. Well, let's turn to the ports then. But before we do that, well, no, let's do this first. I know that you guys have been to several of these ports, maybe all of them. For first-time cruisers or people going down to the Southern Caribbean for the first time, do you have any tips as far as like planning on what you would do in each one of these ports? What do you guys do? Do you use like Disney Cruise Line site or just other sites? Any thoughts on that, Frank?
Yeah, I think you have to decide what you want to do because there's a variety of different things. So there's water activities, there's like land tours of the island. Bonaire has some sort of unique things where they have like the salt flats that you can go see. They have these enclaves of donkeys that run wild on the island, in addition to just having fabulous reefs and water sports and stuff like that. Aruba appears to me to be a very upscale shopping destination for people that are interested in that sort of thing. We actually did an excursion in Aruba, and on the way back, they stopped the bus kind of in the middle of the shopping district in town and let everybody off who wanted to go to some of the high-end stores that were there, that sort of thing. But again, I think it's a matter of your tolerance for, I feel like I can get back to the ship on time and it's not going to be a problem. We actually saw somebody get left on this cruise, not from the Disney ship, but from another ship, from an NCL ship, and they didn't make it. And we saw them on the pier. So that's the good thing about Disney excursions. One of the excursions was late and we waited for them. Whereas if you're late and you're not on a ship-sponsored excursion, that you run the risk of getting left behind, which is not a good thing.
So maybe first time going there, definitely maybe think about the Disney excursions. But I feel like the more we go to different places and you get comfortable with them, it makes it easier to kind of venture out on your own and know how to get back on time, maybe, or well, not know how to get back on time, but you feel more comfortable about actually getting back on time.
Yeah, I think that's true of ports that we've been to before and places that we're pretty comfortable with how long it takes to get somewhere and where you're going and that sort of thing.
Okay. Before we turn to the ports, a couple of questions here. What are your thoughts about doing the Southern Caribbean out of Port Canaveral versus Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico, you got to fly there, but a little bit closer to heading south versus a little bit longer drive from Port Canaveral. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think, it was pretty clear that he had the engines open full for 2 days to get down to Aruba, and it was that full 2 days to get there from Port Canaveral. So we started off with 2 sea days where, as if you're leaving from San Juan or somewhere closer, you can get there a little bit more quickly. The interesting thing is the part of the itinerary that was a little bit irritating really had nothing to do with which port we left out of. It's that back leg, which is the same back leg on the Eastern Caribbean, where you go from St. Thomas to Castaway. And because of the distance from St. Thomas to Castaway, you're lucky if you get there by 10 o'clock. And we actually didn't get off the ship till closer to 11 o'clock. And so you lose a lot of the day. And that's just something that they always seem to do. They do it on all the Easterns. And you just end up with a shorter Castaway Key day than you do with some of the other ships.
Not to mention, if you have any port things you want to do in Castaway, generally the wind picks up later in the day too. So a lot of times those things can get canceled by the time, 11, 12 or something like that, where maybe they would have gone early. I don't know. But yeah, it's a good point there.
Yeah. But, otherwise it was fine. And as I said, it's just so easy for us to get to Port Canaveral. But if you're flying, the other thing is San Juan is a beautiful city. And so when we took the first time we took a cruise out of San Juan, we actually stayed there for a little while before the cruise just to get a chance to see the city and something different. And, as most people know, who've cruised out of Port Canaveral, there's not a whole lot around there. So
right.
It's not really a destination particularly.
So kind of, extending that vacation as far as, spending in Puerto Rico time in Puerto Rico as well. So, all right. How about, so when the time you went out of Puerto Rico, I believe you said you went on the Wonder and this time you're on the Fantasy. Any thoughts between, the larger ship versus the classic ship going to these destinations?
No, I think we were pretty fortunate because in pretty much all of the ports on this cruise, we were either the only ship there or one of 2 ships there. So no place seemed really crowded. It does make a difference at Castaway. When you're on the bigger ships, there's just a lot more people on Castaway and it seems a lot more crowded. We like the smaller ships. We kind of like the little bit more intimate feel. So, but there are good things about the bigger ones as well. And I don't know that I would, if they did this itinerary again, I would go on whatever ship was going there. I don't think that would really make as much a difference for me.
No, that totally makes sense. I think that the Dream, they really needed to extend the port times this year in Europe just because they had so many more people getting off and coming back on. So I think that really helped. It also made it kind of nicer for us to be able to spend more time. You could do more things in the ports, which is kind of cool. So I know that was one accommodation I think they had to change with the bigger ships. So I was just wondering versus the Southern as well. Okay, let's turn to these ports then. You take off at a Port Canaveral, you get 2 days at sea, and then you're on into Aruba, the ABC Islands. What'd you guys have planned there, Frank?
We went to a place called De Palm Island, which is a little island off the coast that sort of sits in the middle of a coral reef. They've got a little water park. They've got beach areas. And what we ended up doing, and we had to do this separately through Shoreside before the cruise, is we ended up renting a cabana on the island for the four of us, which cost about half what a Castaway Cay cabana cost. So that was nice. But it was a cabana with lounge chairs. It was covered. We had a refrigerator with water. They delivered drinks, all that stuff. And basically had steps that went right down into the water, right by the reef. So you could go snorkel and see the fish and then come back up and relax. And that was just amazing. We had a great time that day. The weather was really nice. De Palm Island, whether you do the cabana thing or not, also provides food. The drinks are included in the price as well. So it was a really nice day. And basically we got there as soon as we could. We were supposed to come back sooner than we did, but we decided we're just going to stay here till they make us leave. And so we were on the last boat back at about 5:30 or something like that. But the Disney ship was actually in Port in Aruba till 10 p.m. So we weren't worried about missing the ship or anything like that.
I know you and Karen are big snorkelers. How was the snorkeling there?
It was very good in terms of seeing a lot of fish. We had some pretty rough weather for most of this cruise in terms of it being really windy. And so there were some decent waves and decent current. And depending on which direction you were trying to go, you either just float and go, or you're swimming for your life trying to get to where you're trying to get to. So that piece of it was fine. I mean, we're both pretty good swimmers, so we weren't too worried about that. But that was the one thing we noticed on this cruise. You know, the other thing I will just mention is there were a lot fewer people outdoors at places like Satellite Falls and things like that, just because it was so windy. Stuff was just sort of blowing all over the place. They had a lot of the chairs tied down. It was a really windy cruise.
Especially when, I mean, obviously it was windy. And then on top of, when you've got to motor as fast as they do to go between St. Thomas and Castaway, and then also those 2 days to get south, it always seems to be really windy up there. The other question I had was, how did you know that you could do that cabana through Shoreside?
So one of the things that we did before, when we booked the cruise and it wasn't time to book Port Adventures yet, is you can't see what the Port Adventures are in the app, but you can go on the Disney Cruise Line website and look up the port, and they will list basically every port adventure that's possible. They may or may not offer them all, but they have the full list of them. And one of them was a cabana add-on for De Palm Island. And we're like, ooh, that sounds neat. We want to do that. So basically the first day that we could book things, I ended up emailing them. They emailed me back. You had to pay for it up front. In fact, they sent us an email. It said, you have this reserved. You need to pay within the next hour. We're going to give it to somebody else, is basically what the email said. So they seem to be pretty popular, though. People were really happy to have them. So,
and for people, I haven't been there. I know Christy's been to Aruba. For people who haven't been to Aruba, is this a port where once the ship docks, you can kind of walk off into town, or did they have shuttles that ran into town for people that just wanted to do something like that?
It's sort of an industrial kind of port area, so you could walk it, but probably not the best idea. So you do have to sort of get a little shuttle or something. Again, like I said, that's why the bus kind of stopped on the way back. That was our shuttle, and let people off in the shopping area.
Well, on to Bonaire then. I know Bonaire is known for its scuba diving, I believe. It's kind of a destination for scuba divers from all over the world to go to. What did you guys have planned there, Frank?
Yeah, so Bonaire, probably has some of the best reefs in the Caribbean, both for scuba and for snorkeling. Bonaire was fun because we were the only ship in port. The Fantasy had never been there before, so it was pretty neat. You just jumped to the end. When we left port, I think the captain played every horn 3 or 4 times just to sort of celebrate the first time that the Fantasy had been to Bonaire. But Bonaire is very different from most Caribbean islands. It's a Dutch island, and it purposefully has tried not to become sort of the typical Caribbean tourist attraction. So there's no Diamonds International or any of those other stores or anything like that. It's still a good bit more rural. The pier lets you off right into sort of the downtown area. They've got an outdoor shopping area with like local craftspeople and things like that. They have some stores and things. But we ended up doing a sail and snorkel trip. It was limited to 12 people, and it was, not a large sailboat. It was a boat that would fit all 12 of us. And it was really fun because they used the motor just to get out of the dock, out into the water, and then the rest of it was under full sail. The captain was telling us that he had formerly been a professional sailor in the Netherlands. And because it's a Dutch island, he was able to sort of transfer his love of the water to come down to Bonaire and live there. And he said, Bonaire is a great place to live if you like to sail and if you like swimming, snorkeling, scuba. He said, if you don't like those things, there's not much else to do here. But anyway, so we did a probably about 30, 45 minute sail out to one of the reefs. Then we did an hour or so of snorkeling, really amazing reefs, amazing variety of fish, turtles, all kinds of things. And then had some snacks on the sail back into the port, and then just walked around a little while and did some shopping and that sort of thing.
Did you guys get any food while you're off the boat then, or did you eat mostly on the ship?
We were thinking about it, but it really, we didn't see anything that we thought seemed like it was really anything special or anything like that. In the past, when we've been to Bonaire, they used to have food vendors in the big outdoor market. They used to set up like their outdoor grills and all that kind of stuff. But I think because there was only one ship in port that day, they weren't doing that. And so we ended up just going back and grabbing something to eat on the ship.
And this may be a weird question, but being a Dutch island, what kind of a currency do they take as far as if you wanted to do shopping? I'm sure they take credit cards, obviously.
They take credit cards and they convert prices to US dollars. So we were fine with that.
Okay. Do you ever get, good friend of the show, Amber, had some problems when they went up to Bermuda as far as being able to get money out. Do you guys ever take money out of ATMs when you're in the islands, or do you just use your credit cards?
We usually just use our credit card. We've done it. The one place we've done it is in Canada. I can't think of any other foreign country where we've tried to get money out of an ATM.
Yeah, I think it was just, that was just there. The only other place that I've heard was like over in Catalina Island. And I think it was Dennis that was saying that, like, if you wanted to get the golf carts, you had to have cash at the closest place. That's all they would take. But generally, it's been our experience, too, that you can always use credit cards everywhere you go.
Right. I mean, it is a good idea to have some cash for tips, but other than that, we really don't use cash for much of anything else.
Any other things, because you've been there before, anything else stand out in Bonaire as far as what you would maybe recommend somebody doing if they didn't want to get out on the water?
So what I would have done if I didn't have people traveling with me who were just a little skittish about not missing the boat. One of the big things you can do in Bonaire is rent a golf cart. If you do that, you can go anywhere. I mean, it's not a big island. So you could go around and you could go to a beach and you could swim, or you could go see the donkeys or the salt flats or all those kinds of things. And I would love to do that sometime, just sort of tool around the island, see the different things. It's pretty straightforward in terms of how you get around and that kind of thing. So that's, I think, something people might consider as another option if they're comfortable doing that kind of thing.
I guess there's a Bonaire Avenue near where we live, and so that's what came up. So there we go, Bonaire. I just want to see how big it was. Cool.
And the other thing is they're actually the ACB islands, because it's Aruba, Curacao, Bonaire in that order.
So it's not the ABC. We've been saying it wrong with the ABC.
Everybody calls it ABC all the time, but actually Curacao is in between Aruba and Bonaire.
And Curacao, they want their respect, huh?
I guess so. We can go there.
All right. From there, you guys are off to, I'm going to let you say it, because I always say Antigua, but it's not that. How do you say it?
That was a running debate between the cruise directors and cruise staff and everybody. And basically the people on the island were like say it however you want to, but the guys on the excursion that we were on that were locals said Antigua.
Well, what did you guys have planned there? What did you guys end up doing?
We did a thing called, I forget what it was called, but it was basically a boat trip around the entire island with a stop for some snorkeling and some time at a beach and lunch and that sort of thing. I'm honestly wishing we had booked something else because it turned out not to be, it was kind of the one not so great thing that happened during the trip. You know, I mentioned it was really windy on this trip, and that boat trip around Antigua, there were people vomiting. There were people just turning green, feeling sick. The water was really, really rough. And so I think that made it kind of a less fun excursion. And then by the time we got out to the place where you could do the snorkeling, it apparently had taken us longer to get out there than they expected. So it really wasn't a snorkel trip. It was more of a forced swim. They sort of put us in the water and said, okay, everybody's got to stay together. We swam out, we swam back. You couldn't stop and look around or do any of that stuff. So we didn't get to see as much. So it looks like a beautiful island, and it really, and we've been there before, and it is. There are beautiful beaches. There's a lot of very nice people there, but this particular day did not work out great for us in the grand scheme of things.
I suppose with the choppy waters, it kind of slowed them how fast they could go around the island. It looks like a pretty big island too.
It is. Yeah. So they would have to move at a pretty good speed. And yeah, it's like, I mean, when they would hit one of the waves, the entire boat would get soaked. It was not, I mean, fortunately, I have never had issues with that sort of thing, and hopefully I never will, but there were some people that really were not doing particularly too well.
Oh yeah, I could imagine. What other things, I guess if you hadn't done that, what would you have done? Do you remember?
I think if we hadn't done that, we'd have gone to one of the beaches, because the beaches just look beautiful. And there's a lot of them sort of scattered around the island. The other thing is it apparently is a very popular tourist destination for people just to go like for a week or something like that, because there's just all sorts of different resorts all around the island, you know, everything from sort of high-rise hotels to, there was another one that were sort of these little individual huts on stilts over the water and kind of everything in between. So, I mean, it really looks like a really nice place to visit, but they've got a lot of really nice beaches, and the water was beautiful once we got to the little protective cove that we ended up at, but the rest of it was just unfortunately a rough day.
I'm not sure I would have enjoyed that. I'm like you. I haven't really gotten seasick, but I know Onawake would have been miserable on that one. So maybe heads up. Usually they do, at least in Europe, they've generally put little blurbs in that sometimes on the port excursions. Well, they'll say, hey, sometimes this can be rough as far as, I'm trying to remember the one that they said, I distinctly remember, was when we did the Mediterranean. It was like a boat trip to Portofino. And they did say in the description that sometimes the water can be rough. Did it say anything like that by any chance?
No, not that I mean, it may have. I don't recall it though.
Okay.
And we've been to Antigua before and done sort of little boat trips and stuff and never had a problem like that.
Yeah. And it sounds like that was kind of the weather that week down where you guys were. So, all right. From there, you guys are off to St. Thomas. I know you've been there many times. What do you guys have planned?
There's a particular excursion that our friends love, so we do it with them whenever we go with them. It's called the Champagne Catamaran Sail and Snorkel.
I'm getting a champagne theme here with you guys.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is champagne was not what caused my downfall. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay, I didn't know there was a downfall. I'm sorry.
But no, it turned out okay. So, you know, you sail out there to St. John, which is one of the neighboring islands that's mostly national park. And there's sort of this protective cove that they stop at. And we went off, and the snorkeling was great. It was a beautiful reef, lots of fish. There's another area where lots of turtles just hang out and play. So we got to see them. And so that was a lot of fun. But then on the way back, they opened the bar, and the rum punch is way stronger than it seems to be when you start drinking it. Let's just put it that way.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, yeah, I'm fine. I was okay. But yeah, I probably shouldn't have had the third one.
It was a happy adventure too.
It was a happy adventure, and I didn't have to drive anywhere, and there were people who could tell me how to get back to the ship. So,
how was the snorkeling there?
It was fantastic. It was really good. They have some really nice coral down there in the kind of protected area, and a lot of different kinds of fish and things like. And again, like all the turtles, the water in this particular place off St. John is really nice and clear. What they told us was that St. John, I think, is like 70 or 80% of it protected as national park. There's not a lot of business on it or anything like that. There's one big house at the top of one of the mountains that apparently belongs to Blake Shelton. And they say, yeah, he helicopters in there and that's how he gets in and out. So, but for the most part, it's just national park. It's protected area, and the water was just beautiful.
So we are going on the Eastern for Christmas, and we want to scuba dive in both places. Which one do you like better, Tortola or St. Thomas, do you think?
Personally, I like St. Thomas better.
Okay.
But it's going to depend on, the trip and where they're going to take you and that sort of thing.
Right.
And whether, you're interested in seeing wrecks versus other kinds of things.
I'm always up for a good Spanish galleon wreck or something like that, but usually it doesn't end up being something like that. But looking forward to it. Well, I'm glad you guys had a good time there. From there, you get your day at sea over to Castaway. Anything stand out at Castaway this time?
No, it was, again, the big thing is that it was just really crowded. So we were really trying to make sure we got out to Serenity Bay pretty quickly so that we could get, chairs and umbrellas and all that kind of stuff. But really just spent the day out there, spent some time in the water, read some of my book, had lunch at the barbecue out there. And so that was just a, relaxing Castaway Key day.
We were talking ahead of time. You said this is like the busiest ship you've seen, and a lot of adults. Was Serenity Bay pretty busy then?
Yeah, it was really very busy. And the ship as a whole, like when you went to the adult shows in the evening, the tube was like packed to the gills and people couldn't get in for some of the adult shows, that sort of thing. I think probably because it's a little bit more unique itinerary and probably more expensive than the typical cruise because it's a longer cruise. And so there were kids on the ship, but there were a lot of adults, and it just seemed about as crowded as I've ever seen it be on a ship, at least since the pandemic, for sure.
We kind of had this similar experience in Europe and on the Dream as well. Like if you wanted to go to the adult shows, I don't know if it got to capacity necessarily because we always got there probably about 15 minutes early, but definitely by the time the show started, the place, that's the busiest I've ever seen it also. So I know that the cruises are very busy this year. Right. No Florida residency rates have been popping, or not too many, have they?
No, there's not much anything that popping up. So
I mean, that's good for Disney, and the ships are busy, but definitely makes it a little bit busier on the ship. Okay, so before we kind of finish up here, I got a couple things, but I guess being a longtime Disney cruiser, what are your thoughts about Castaway versus Lighthouse? Now, I know you haven't been there. Nobody's been to Lighthouse Point and everything like that. But like, do you want to see the ships go to both? What's your thoughts between the two of those as far as like, what do you want to see like in itineraries? I guess what would be a dream itinerary for you guys?
I think we have it booked because we're doing a cruise on the Magic, I think next August, that goes to both. So I think that'll be neat. I think we're going to have to see how Lighthouse turns out to be and what it's like. My sense is I'm not sure what I want because again, I don't know what it's going to be like particularly, but my guess is that the newer ships like the Wish and the Treasure are probably not going to go to Lighthouse. They're probably going to go to Castaway because I think they're trying to get more people to book some of the older ships. And so those I think will be the ones that are going to Lighthouse Point, at least at first.
And also down out of Fort Lauderdale versus Port Canaveral, which is a little bit further away.
Yeah. Although I'm really excited about Port Canaveral versus Miami because, we live in Florida, so we drive. And the miserable part of the drive to Port Miami is like the last hour between Fort Lauderdale and Miami. So not having to do that last part of the drive is going to be nice.
I stayed in Fort Lauderdale once. I've been there a couple of times, but just once recently. And it's, there was a couple of ships in port. They seemed like, maybe just a little bit quieter port, easier port to get into and out of, I guess. I shouldn't say quiet, but like maybe it's going to be a lot easier than Miami is to sail out of there, it seems like.
I think so, just because, I grew up down there and South Florida traffic between Fort Lauderdale and Miami was a disaster 30 years ago, and it hasn't gotten any better. So
have you heard anything about the Brightline? Know anybody that's taken the Brightline as far as the new train that goes down from Orlando?
I was talking to somebody who lives in Orlando about that, and they said, yeah, it sounds good on paper, but it was going to cost them $300+ round trip for two people.
Whoa.
And forget it. We'll just drive and stay in a hotel and Still won't cost us as much.
Yeah, you can definitely get a rental car. I just booked tickets one way between, because next month we're going to stay at the new Disneyland Hotel, the DVC portion. So we're going to go down, spend one night there, and then we're going to take the train down from there, from Anaheim down to San Diego to meet our friends. And it's probably about a 2.5 hour train ride, and it was $40 each one way.
Yeah, we were going to do that actually last year, but that was when they had to close down some of the tracks, so we weren't able to. But
I remember that.
It's quite reasonable.
And that was a guaranteed seat. So $300 round trip for two people on the Brightline, that's pretty expensive.
Apparently it's pretty expensive. And it may have been the time of year that they were going around. I don't know about that, but yeah, it's at least from a cost standpoint. And the other thing is I'm not sure where it ends up in Miami. And so I don't know whether it's in a convenient spot or not.
Well, it's going to stop in Fort Lauderdale too, right? So you should be able to take it down.
So from Fort Lauderdale, it should be okay. I know where the train station in Fort Lauderdale is. So you won't be able to walk to the port or anything like that, but it's not that far away.
Well, anything else about this cruise that we haven't talked about that you wanted to touch on, Frank?
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking about is one of the nice things about the longer cruises is you get some different dinner menus. The 7-night cruises sort of have their set menus, 2 of them in each of the dining rooms, plus the pirate menu. But we actually got sort of 3 menus that I don't know that we'd ever had before. And that was just fun to have some different food that was hit and miss. Some of it was really good. Some of it was not. Actually, the best thing we had, and I know this is going to sound like, wow, that was really the best thing, was this pasta dish with scallops and asparagus, which I know doesn't sound all that special, but it was amazing. On the other hand, one night they had pad thai, and I love pad thai, but what they served us was not pad thai. Our server actually told us, he said, don't order it. He said, it's terrible. You'll hate it. So we didn't order it, but then he brought us a dish of it anyway, because he said, I want you to try it and see how bad it is, and then we'll tend to take it back.
I want you to validate what I'm telling everybody.
Right. Yeah, but again, it was just nice to have some different stuff, and so that was kind of fun.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say this. If they do a Coco restaurant, I'm a little worried about it, because I love Mexican food, and there's like a whole different variety of genres of Mexican food, and I'm worried to see what they're gonna serve, but maybe it'll end up being great.
The only thing that gives me hope is that Donald's Cantina on the Wish is pretty good, which is the sort of place out on the pool deck.
That's a good point, because I'm worried about the meat and what they're like, the spices in the meat, and they're just not going to have any flavor. I mean,
and when I say it's pretty good, I mean it's like kind of Chipotle level.
Yeah.
Just fun.
It's not bad, but I don't know. I know there's a lot. Sorry, I keep talking over you. I know there's lots of different levels of Mexican food and what people like and what they expect Mexican food to be, but living on the West Coast and having the California kind of vibe and everything like that, I really enjoy that type of food when you get down in Southern California.
Yeah. So, it's just a matter of, is it going to be kind of Chipotle, or is it going to be kind of more Taco Bell, which is
right. So, we'll have to find out if that even happens. So,
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the treasure. I'm kind of looking forward to that.
Okay, well, hold that thought for just a second. Before we finish this one, any tips for somebody going first time on a Southern Caribbean, or, thinking about a Southern Caribbean cruise like this?
I mean, my advice would be, if you can do it, jump on it, because I think there's only one more that's on the schedule. It's going to Aruba and Curacao instead of Bonaire, I think, and a couple of other different ports. They don't do them that often, and it's a really neat place to go and visit and see some different ports and some different places. So I highly recommend them if people can do them.
Yeah, I would love to. That's definitely a bucket list trip for us to get down and do one of these. And we're kind of targeting maybe 2025 on the Fantasy. Although, I don't know, I'll have to watch and see where it goes, because now you kind of changed I would love to really go to Puerto Rico. Just
because, again, it's such a neat place to visit and spend some time there as well.
Well, let's talk about the treasure real quick. A lot of like rumors flying around: Haunted Mansion, potentially bar, stuff like that. Coco restaurant, Moana show, maybe. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I guess hopefully we'll find out soon, within the next month or so. Hopefully there'll be some more stuff announced about it. But I'm just interested to see what they mean, because I have read in several places where they said, we have made adjustments based on guest feedback about the Wish. I'm curious as to what that means, because a lot of it is infrastructure that they just can't change. So I think there are things that they can do differently. Like you said, maybe do a Haunted Mansion bar, other themes, those kinds of things. But it'll be interesting to see whether they are able to address, one of the big complaints from people, for example, is there's not a lot of sort of seating with shade in the adult areas. The adult areas get pretty crowded. And I don't know if they could do what they did years ago. So when they got those complaints about the Dream and the Fantasy, they put Satellite Falls in, which wasn't there initially. I don't know whether they have the space to do something like that or not, whether they could take like the Chip and Dale pool maybe and turn that into an adult area or something. So we'll have to see what happens. But, it'll be fun to see what the different restaurants are going to be and those sorts of things. But again, the structural part of it, I'm just not sure there's much they can do. And when we were on the Wish, we talked with our servers. We got to know them pretty well. And they were saying the real problem is just where the kitchen is. And it's just really far away from a couple of the dining rooms. And I don't think they can change something like that. I think the blocks are what the blocks are for those ships. So we'll see.
That's a good idea with the Chip and Dale pool. I wonder how busy that really is used up there. I mean, with the big space in the middle of the ship, I wonder how many people even know it's up there, families and stuff. So that could be a good extension, maybe adding some space up there for adults.
Yeah.
And to your point with the kitchen, I'm not sure they can do much with that. And then also spacing in the dining room. Some people will talk about that where it's a little bit tight, but
it's really tight. In fact, the Wish cruise that we were on, we didn't get to see the sort of Olaf animatronic character. And we asked about it, and the server said, well, I'll tell you the truth. We broke him because he didn't fit through the spaces all that well. So, it's so we'll see. It's a learning curve, and hopefully they'll at least be able to make some improvements on the Treasure. Then the other interesting thing is all the speculation about what the Treasure is going to do. And all signs seem to point to them taking over kind of the Fantasy 7-night Eastern Western alternating out of Canaveral. So we'll have to see if that turns out to be true.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if they do that. And maybe our long-term running joke of the Fantasy coming to the West Coast might eventually come true. We'll see what happens there.
So what's the true answer? Can the Fantasy fit through the canal or not?
So from what I've seen looking at it, yes, it can.
Okay.
Because it's the same size as some of the Norwegian ships that have gone through the canal. So from my understanding, it is yes. I looked at that probably maybe 6 months or a year and a half ago at one point, but I'll definitely go back and take a look at it again, see what like the size dimensions are. But from what I remember looking at it, that it could.
I know that I saw that they had to do some port changes in Europe because the Dream was bigger, where they it makes a difference.
Yeah, so like Switzerland, when it goes to Switzerland, it takes the land route. No, when you go to Stockholm, we were on a bigger Norwegian ship, and I remember the Magic could park right downtown Stockholm, but the ship that we were on had to go into, and I can't say it it starts with an N, but it's like an hour outside of Stockholm because it was a bigger ship. And it's set up really nice. There's a train, you get off the ship, get on the train, takes you right into Stockholm. So I do believe that there are some ports like that the Dream could not do because of how big she is.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens when all the new ships are online. I hope they don't just leave the Wonder in Australia, because we love the Wonder. And if it's out there, we're probably never going to get on it again. But
I know. I'm hoping she makes that right-hand turn in the 2025, February 2025. It comes down to San Diego, but we'll see what happens to her there. I guess, old Olaf should have spent more time in the summer and thinned up a little bit so he could have fit through the spaces. So.
I think so. Yeah.
All right, Frank, before we get out of here, what's next for you and your beautiful wife, Karen? What do you guys got planned next?
So we are going to be doing the DVC member cruise on the Wish coming up in September. We've never been on a DVC member cruise before, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. The advice we've gotten from people is bring an extra suitcase because apparently you get lots of swag. So obviously looking forward to that. But that's our next one.
I think the talks that they would have on board would be fascinating with some of the people that they bring on board. I would love to see. I love the history of the company. So being able to see history, whether it's animation or the parks or whatever else, I think it would be cool to be able to experience some of those.
Right.
So once again, Frank, thank you so much for coming on and taking time out of your busy day today. Sure do appreciate you talking about your guys' latest trip down to the Southern Caribbean. And thank you so much for all the support you've given our podcast over the years. And I really do appreciate it. All of us here, Christy, Nova, myself, and Blake. So thank you so much, Frank.
Yeah, I love doing it. Thanks for having me on again.
All right. Well, all the best to you. Enjoy the rest of the summer. And if we don't see you down there sometime soon at Walt Disney World in one of our travels, I look forward to talking to you after you guys get back from the DVC member cruise.
Sounds good. Thanks, Steve.
All right. All the best. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show. Once again, I really want to thank Frank for coming on and sharing his and his wife's experiences. They sailed on the beautiful Disney Fantasy down to the Southern Caribbean. Definitely a bucket list. As I said earlier, for our family and for a lot of you out there, hope you enjoyed this show. As always, we'd like to give a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters who help bring this show to you each and every week ad-free. If you'd like to find out how you can support our show, you can go to patreon.com/DCL podcast and find out all the information there. And thank you for each and every one of you who've taken time to leave us a 5-star review. That helps us get the show a little bit better known in the Disney cruising, the Disney podcasting, and just the cruising podcasting community in general. Thank you for each and every one of you who've taken the time to do it. Well, if you are headed out on a Disney cruise, headed down to the parks, headed out on Adventures by Disney, Christy is leaving here soon to wing her way to Europe on a beautiful crystal Christmas market. I wanted to say it in German, but beautiful Christmas market cruise with Adventures by Disney. Can't wait to bring that show to you. On behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, Lake, and Nova, all of us here at the DCL Podcast, we want to wish you to be well. Enjoy time with family and friends during this special time of the year, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast. Goodbye, everybody.
The DCL Podcast is unaffiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.